My father's hand was already pointing toward the door when I walked in. I had barely made it past the hostess stand. I still had my coat half-buttoned, my bag over one shoulder, a light dusting of February snow melting on my boots. The restaurant was warm and loud with the kind of chatter that comes with open bars and old colleagues reuniting. I could smell garlic bread and someone's too-strong cologne. I saw the long reserved table at the back, the balloon arrangement that said 60 and retired in gold foil letters, and I saw my father's face the moment he registered mine. He didn't even let me reach him. He cut across the room like I had set something on fire just by arriving. "You weren't supposed to be here," he said, not quietly. A few heads turned. Not everyone, not yet, but enough. I had rehearsed this moment on the drive down the 401 from Ottawa. I had rehearsed it through 2 Tim Hortons stops and a wrong turn off the exit ramp near Scarborough. I knew this was a possibility. I knew him. And still, standing there under the warm lighting of a Mississauga restaurant with 40 people slowly noticing the exchange happening near the entrance, I felt my throat close the way it always did around him. "My brother invited me," I said. "Your brother made a mistake." He said it the way he said most things, as though the matter was already settled, already filed away, already done. My father had spent 32 years as a site foreman on construction projects across the GTA. He was a man who decided things. Concrete pours, crew schedules, load-bearing calculations, he made the call and everyone moved accordingly. His retirement party had been planned for 6 months. The guest list, apparently, had been decided just as firmly. "I'm not going to cause a scene," I said. "I just want to see you celebrate. I won't even—" "There are people here," he said, dropping his voice just slightly, though the edge in it sharpened. "People I worked with for decades. People who matter. This isn't the night for whatever this is." Whatever this is. I had heard that phrase my whole life. My choices, my education, my career, my entire adult existence had been reduced by my father into whatever this is. A shrug dressed up as a sentence. I took a breath. My brother appeared at my father's elbow then, red-faced and apologetic in the way he had been apologetic my entire life, genuinely sorry but never quite sorry enough to change anything. "Dad, come on." She drove 3 hours. Then she can drive 3 hours back. I want to tell you that I held myself together perfectly in that moment. I want to tell you I was calm and composed and completely unbothered. That would be a convenient story. The truth is that my eyes stung, and I looked down at my boots, and for about 4 seconds I was 22 years old again, sitting in our kitchen in Hamilton, with my acceptance letter from the University of Ottawa Faculty of Law on the table between us, waiting for my father to say something that would feel like pride. He had not said something that felt like pride then either. He had said, "Claire, be realistic." I should give you some context, because none of this started at a retirement party in Mississauga. It started, as most things in my family did, with the gap between what my father believed and what was actually true. My father believed, with the kind of certainty that doesn't require evidence, that I had been drifting since I was 19. He believed this because I had not followed the path he understood. My older brother went into trades, became an electrician, bought a house in Stony Creek at 26. That was a path my father could hold in his hands, measure, point to. My younger sister went to Mohawk College, became a dental hygienist, married a man who coached minor hockey, also a path with visible, physical coordinates. Then there was me. I changed my major twice. I waitressed at a Swiss chalet on Upper James Street through 2 years of my undergrad. I told my parents I was studying political science, then criminology, and somewhere in there my father decided I was the kind of person who didn't finish things. I don't entirely blame him for arriving at that conclusion. I gave him very little information, because every time I offered information, he responded with a version of "be realistic" or "when are you going to get serious" or, once, memorably, "I'm not paying for you to take courses in reading." I stopped offering information. I finished my undergrad. I wrote the LSAT. I applied to law schools. I was accepted at Ottawa with a partial scholarship. The night I found out, I called home from my apartment in Hamilton, sitting on the floor of my living room because I didn't have a couch yet, and I told my father I had been accepted to law school. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Claire, a lot of people start law school. I know. A lot of people don't finish it. I know that too. And even the ones who finish it, they end up doing what? Real estate closings? Wills for old people? I just don't understand what the plan is." I said I would call him when I graduated. He said, "Well, let me know how it goes." That was the last real conversation we had about my career for 4 years. Law school was not what people imagine it is, unless they have been inside it. It is reading until your eyes stop tracking words properly. It is cold takeout containers on casebooks and 6 a.m. alarms, and the particular anxiety of knowing that one exam will shape the next 6 months of your life. I loved it. I loved it in the grinding, unglamorous way that you love something that is hard and real and yours. I called home occasionally. Christmas, birthdays. My father would ask vague questions and accept vague answers. School going okay? Yes. You making ends meet? Yes. He never asked what I was studying specifically. I never pushed the topic. We had arrived at a kind of détente, polite, surface level, carefully maintained. I graduated. I passed the bar. I articled at a mid-size firm in Ottawa for just under a year before I received an offer I had quietly been hoping for since my second year of law school, the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Federal Crown Attorney. I said yes before they finished explaining the benefits package. The work was what I had been building toward without quite having words for it. Organized crime, drug trafficking networks, financial fraud on a scale that moved through shell companies and international accounts and took months of case preparation to understand, let alone argue in court. It was precise, demanding, unglamorous in its own particular way. I went to work at 7 most mornings. I ate lunch at my desk more often than not. I knew every page of every brief I touched. I was also, by any external measure, doing well. I had been recognized twice by the department. I had argued and won several cases that attracted some attention in legal circles and, on 2 occasions, in the news. Not my name in the news, not exactly. Crown prosecutors don't generally seek profiles, but the cases, the outcomes. Back home in Hamilton, none of this had landed. I had tried, once, to explain what I did to my mother. She had nodded with the patient expression of someone hearing a foreign language and said, "So you work for the government?" "Yes," I said. "Do you like it?" "I love it," I said. "Your father worries about you," she said. I had stopped trying after that. I understood that from the outside, from their vantage point in Hamilton, the picture looked like this. Claire had moved to Ottawa. Claire had been in school forever. Claire rented an apartment. Claire was not married. Claire visited twice a year and spoke in complete sentences about things nobody understood. Claire was probably fine, but nobody could quite tell. I had built something real and true and mine, and it had happened almost entirely outside of their field of vision. I had tried to change that. The bar passage, the job offer, the first time I stood up in federal court, I had tried, each time, to find a way to tell them. And each time I came close. I remembered my father's voice on my apartment floor in Hamilton. A lot of people start law school. I remembered the look on his face when I had shown him my acceptance letter. I remembered 22 years of be realistic and whatever this is. I was not ready to hand him something new to dismiss, so I didn't. And the years moved, and the distance between us became its own kind of structure. Solid, weight-bearing, invisible to anyone standing outside it, back to the restaurant. Back to my father's pointing hand and the balloon arch and the February cold still fading from my coat. "I'm not here to embarrass you," I said. "Then leave." My brother made a sound next to him. "Dad, I have guests. I have people I respect coming tonight. People from the union. People from the city. This isn't the time, Marcus." My name is not Marcus. That was my brother. My father was talking to my brother, past me, about me, the way he had done my entire childhood, as though I were a problem to be managed, rather than a person to be addressed. Something shifted in me then. Not anger, exactly. Something quieter than that. I had driven 3 hours. I had bought him a card that took me 45 minutes to select. I had worn my good coat. And I was standing in a Mississauga restaurant doorway being pointed toward the exit like I had wandered in from the street. "Okay," I said. My brother's head came up. "Claire." "No, it's fine." I started to button my coat back up. "Tell Mom I said happy." "Claire." That wasn't my brother's voice. I turned. A woman was standing just behind my brother's left shoulder. I had seen her briefly when I first walked in, had registered her as someone's date, someone in a dark blazer, someone I didn't recognize from my father's work circles. She was maybe 35, sharp-faced, with the kind of attention in her eyes that made you feel like you had just been read in full. Her name, I would learn shortly, was Diane. She was my brother's girlfriend of 8 months, a fact my mother had mentioned in a text I had half read on a lunch break 2 months ago. She worked as a court reporter at the Ontario Superior Court in Toronto. She was looking at me with an expression I could not quite interpret. "Sorry," she said, directing this at me, not at my father. "I'm Marcus's girlfriend. I don't think we've met." She paused. "You're Claire." "I am," I said. Something moved across her face. Recognition, then a kind of careful calibration, the expression of someone deciding how much to say, and in what order. "You work in Ottawa," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "I do." She looked at me for a moment longer. Then she looked at my father. Then she looked back at the room, at the table full of my father's colleagues and union friends, at my mother sitting at the far end trying to pretend she couldn't see what was happening near the door. She said slowly, "Mr. Beaumont, I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. You're asking Claire to leave." My father looked at her with mild irritation. "This is a family matter." "I work at the courthouse on University Avenue," she said. "I've been a court reporter there for 9 years. A pause. "I know who Claire is." The room had gotten quieter. Not silent, the background chatter continued, but the cluster of people nearest us had definitely stopped their own conversations. My father's expression shifted slightly, a small uncertainty crossing it, though he smoothed it quickly. "I know who she is," he said. "She's my daughter." "She's also a federal Crown attorney," Diane said. "She argued the LaRue Network case 18 months ago. 14 convictions. It was on CBC. It was in the Globe." Another pause. "I've watched her in court, Mr. Beaumont. She seemed to choose her next word with some care. She's exceptional." The quiet spread a little further. My father's hand, which had still been loosely indicating the door, came down to his side. I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at a point somewhere slightly above and past everyone's heads, the way I had trained myself to look when I was in court, and something unexpected happened and I needed 3 seconds to recalibrate. "You keep your expression neutral. You do not let anyone in that room see you finding your footing." "She never," my father started. He stopped. Something in his face was reorganizing itself into a shape I had not seen before. "I didn't know she was." "What did you say?" "Federal Crown attorney," Diane said. "For the Director of Public Prosecutions. A beat. She prosecutes organized crime and financial fraud. At the federal level." I heard someone at the table near us exhale. I heard my mother say quietly, "Oh." My father looked at me. I looked back at him. There were 40 people in that restaurant, and most of them were now either looking at us directly or doing the specific thing people do when they're looking without wanting to be seen looking. My father's union colleagues. His site superintendent from the Brampton project, who I recognized from a Christmas party 15 years ago. The woman from the city inspector's office who had given him his retirement plaque last week, apparently, because she was holding a wine glass and wearing a lapel pin with the City of Mississauga logo on it. My father opened his mouth. Closed it. "I didn't," he said. "You never told me." And there it was. 4 words that contained 32 years. Here is what I did not do. I did not cry. I had cried in my car on the 401 outside of Milton, alone with the radio off, 20 minutes into the drive, which was exactly the right time and place for that. I did not raise my voice. Not because I was not allowed to, but because I had spent 4 years learning how to argue in rooms where losing your composure means losing the room, and that skill did not turn off outside of court. I did not deliver a speech. I was not going to stand in a Mississauga restaurant and itemize my accomplishments for my father like evidence at trial. That was not what this was. What I said was, "No, I didn't." He waited for more. The room waited for more. "I tried," I said, a few times, but I got tired of trying. I kept my voice even. Not cold, not warm, just even. I got tired of feeling like nothing I said was going to land the way I needed it to land. So I stopped saying it. "Claire, I'm not angry at you right now, Dad." That surprised him. It surprised me a little too, but it was true. What I felt was not anger. Anger was a fire. This was something older and quieter. Like a room that had been dark for a long time. "I'm just tired. I've been tired of this for a while." My mother had gotten up from the table. She was standing about 10 feet back, holding her napkin in both hands, looking at me with an expression that I was not sure I could name. Not guilt, quite. Not pride either. Something in between. Something unfinished. "We didn't know," she said. I know you didn't, I said. But you also didn't ask. Not really. Not in a way that was. I stopped. Not in a way that felt like you actually wanted to know the answer. That landed. I could see it land in her face, and I watched her absorb it with the specific grace my mother had always had for absorbing hard truths, not arguing, not deflecting, just taking it in like weather. My father had not moved. He was standing in front of me, and he looked, for the first time in my memory, like he had miscalculated something and didn't know how to recover. He was 60 years old and he was good at his work and he had built things and led crews and made real decisions in the world, and right now he looked like a man standing in a room where the floor plan had changed without his knowledge. You should have told me, he said. His voice was different now, lower, less certain. Yeah, I said. Maybe. But every time I tried, you told me to be realistic. You told me a lot of people don't finish. You told me you weren't paying for me to read. I kept my hands loose at my sides. Neutral. Easy. I didn't stop telling you to punish you. I stopped because I didn't have enough left to keep handing you something and watching you set it down. Silence. Diane had taken a careful half-step back. My brother was very still. The people at the table had stopped even pretending to have other conversations. I drove up tonight, I said, because I wanted to see you celebrate 32 years of real work. I genuinely did. I was going to have a glass of wine and eat whatever the set menu was and drive back to Ottawa tomorrow morning, and that was it. That was the whole plan. I looked at him steadily, and then you pointed me at the door. He did not say anything. I'm not asking you to apologize tonight, I said. You have a room full of people and it's a good night and I don't want to take that from you. A pause. But I'm also not going to pretend that wasn't what happened. I started to button my coat. Claire? My father's voice had lost its construction site authority. It was just a voice now. An old man's voice, a little rough, a little uncertain. Don't. He stopped. Try it again. Don't go. I looked at him. I want to tell you that something broke open between us in that moment. A wall came down, a bridge appeared, music swelled from somewhere, and we held each other in a Mississauga restaurant while his union friends pretended to look at their bread rolls. That would be a satisfying story. The truth is more modest than that. I looked at my father for a long moment. I saw a 60-year-old man who had spent his life being certain and who was standing, for maybe the first time, in genuine uncertainty. I saw the man who had taught me how to drive and who made very good chili and who had, despite everything, always been standing somewhere in my peripheral vision, even when I wished he wasn't. Ours. Someone who had failed me in a specific, patterned way for a very long time, and I saw that he was only just beginning to understand that. I'll stay for dinner, I said. But we're going to have to actually talk. Not tonight, after, in a way that's real. I unzipped my coat rather than removing it, a halfway gesture, a conditional one. Can you do that? He nodded. It was a small nod, not the decisive motion I had seen him use for concrete pours and project timelines. It was uncertain. It was a beginning. Okay, I said. I sat at the end of the table nearest the door, which suited me fine. Diane sat across from me, and somewhere between the soup course and the main she leaned over and said, quietly, I hope that was okay. What I said. It was, I told her. And then, because it was true and because she deserved to hear it. Thank you. She nodded once. She had the manner of someone who understood that some things don't require elaboration. My brother refilled my water glass twice, and spoke only about the renovations he was doing on his garage, which was exactly the right conversational altitude for the evening. My mother came to sit beside me during dessert and took my hand under the table and held it without saying anything. I let her. My father, across the table, watched me more than he spoke. I could feel it, the recalibration happening behind his eyes. The slow adjustment of a picture he had been looking at for years that was now resolving into a different image than he had believed it to be. After the cake and the speeches from his old colleagues, good speeches, genuine ones, the kind that told you someone had actually done something real in the world, he made his way around the table and sat down in the empty chair beside me. The room had loosened into smaller conversations and someone had turned the music up slightly and the moment had just enough cover to feel private. I should have listened better, he said. Yeah, I didn't. He turned his water glass slowly. I didn't understand what you were doing. I thought. I know what you thought. I was wrong. I looked at my father's hands on the table. Large hands, calloused. The hands of someone who had spent decades doing physical work in Canadian winters. They were still now. Being wrong about what I do for work, I said carefully, is not the same thing as what I actually need you to apologize for. He looked up. I need you to understand that it wasn't about my job. It was never about my job. I kept my voice level. Not soft, not hard, just honest. It was about whether you thought I was worth listening to, whether you thought what I wanted mattered, whether you were going to keep setting down everything I tried to hand you. He was quiet for a long moment. The restaurant moved around us, warm and unaware. I hear you, he said finally. It was not everything. It was not an apology that repaired 4 years of silence or 20 years of be realistic, or the look on his face in our kitchen in Hamilton when I showed him my law school acceptance, and he told me to be careful not to get my hopes up. It did not do any of that. But it was a sentence he had not said before. I had not come to Mississauga expecting to fix my relationship with my father over a set menu and a balloon arch. I had come, I think, to find out whether there was something still worth returning to. Whether the gap between us was the kind that could, given time and honesty and genuine effort on both sides, become smaller. I did not have that answer yet. I was not sure I would have it soon. But I stayed until the restaurant began clearing tables, and the staff started stacking chairs at the edges of the room. I said goodbye to my mother, who held me longer than usual, and said she was proud of me, which was something she had never quite said in those words before. I said goodbye to Diane, who shook my hand formally and then smiled. I said goodbye to my brother, who said, "I'm sorry I didn't do this sooner," and meant something by it that I was willing to accept. And I said goodbye to my father, who stood at the door of the restaurant in his good shirt with the 60 and retired balloon ribbon still tied to the back of his chair inside, and who looked at me in a way that was new, not exactly the way you want your father to look at you, not the full, uncomplicated warmth that would require years of different choices to arrive at, but a look that contained something he had not offered before. Attention. Real attention. The kind that registers what it sees. "Drive safe," he said. "I will. Ottawa in February." He shook his head slightly. "That's a long drive." "I'm used to it." He nodded. And then, quietly, carefully, as though testing whether the words would hold, I'd like to understand better. What you do. What it actually is." I looked at him for a moment. "Call me," I said. "Not a text. Call." He said he would. I walked out into the February dark, pulled my coat closed against the cold, and found my car in the lot. The 401 was clear at that hour. The drive back would take 3 hours, maybe a little less with no traffic through the city. I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before I started the engine. I was not fixed. My family was not fixed. My father had not become someone different in the span of a dinner, and I had not become someone who could simply set down the weight of every dismissal I had carried since I was 19 years old. That was not how people worked, and I was past the age of expecting it to be. What I had was this. I had stayed. I had said the true thing. I had not performed forgiveness. I didn't feel, and I had not withheld the door I was willing to leave open. I had held my ground without needing to win. And somewhere in a restaurant in Mississauga, my father had said, "I hear you," for the first time in my life. That was not nothing. I pulled out of the parking lot and headed for the highway, the city lights of the GTA spreading out behind me, and ahead of me the long, dark road back to the life I had built without anyone watching. It was mine. It had always been mine. That was enough for tonight.